Thanks for tuning in and welcome back to the shop. It is time to weld together the pans that are going to get pushed into the frame that is going to make the floor for the camper box conversion on our 2013 Mitsubishi Fuso. I've set up the sections of floor pan using the steel subframe as a flat jig. I'm also using the box tube on the sides to keep everything in alignment while I weld the sections together. The whole assembly is on my hoist, so the height is infinitely adjustable for maximum comfort while welding. Aluminum really likes to move when being welded, so I'm using lots of clamps to keep things in line as best I can. I'm starting with a sequence of tack welds to get everything flush and in line. Once I have enough tack welds, I'll start filling in the spaces to weld this side solid. The reason I'm doing such short welds is to try to reduce the amount of heat warping. If I weld this all in one pass, it would turn into an aluminum banana. For the same reason, I'm moving from one place to another to try to spread the heat around instead of focusing it all in one progressing line. You may have noticed that I've switched to the foot pedal. This allows me to control the amperage of the welder, which is controlling how hot the puddle is. I'm continuously adjusting the temperature in reaction to how big the molten puddle is, how fast I'm moving, and how the aluminum is reacting. If you've never seen it, here's how it looks from inside the helmet. It's a bit hard to see, but I'm adding filler rod at the side as the puddle moves forward. Squeeze the pedal, make a puddle, dip the rod, and move. It's hard to see directly, but if you look in the double image area, you'll get the idea. TIG welding is not very fast, but it's very controllable because the heat, movement, and filler rod speed are all controlled separately. When you get them all timed properly, it comes out looking like this. On the opposite side from the first weld, I like to back chip a groove with my saw. This allows the second weld to sink deeper into the plate and into the backside of the first weld for a full penetration weld. Here's the groove from the blade. It's not very deep and it's not very wide, but it sure makes a difference in the second pass. Now I'm welding the outside of the pan. It's the same idea with spreading around the heat and using a few clamps to try and keep things straight. Now that that seam is done, I need to repeat this whole process 2 more times for the other 2 floor pans. Before I compress the pans into place, I need to clean the edge of the box tube off. I don't want any contamination coming into the welds between the pan and the frame. Time to move on to the next step. So the edges of these pans have been cleaned and prepped, and the edges of the framing have been cleaned and prepped, so everything's ready to press into place. Other than I need to trim the length of the pans down. When I made these pans, I did make them longer than the openings so that I could trim them to make any adjustments that may be needed. It's always easier to have a pan long and trim it down to shorter than to have a pan that's too short and have to extend it longer. So the next step I'm going to do is trim these 2 outer pans down so that I can press them into the frame. Pretty straightforward here. A saw cut on one end should do it. The little aluminum shavings that come off the saw stick to my shoes and get everywhere, so I'm trying to contain it as much as I can before walking in it. Same thing again for the second pan and we should be good to go. The last thing before pressing the pans in is matching the corners where the welds are and cleaning off any burr from the saw. It's going to take a couple of test fits, but we'll get there. Well, as I'm sure you can imagine, these ends need quite a bit of trimming and fitting and tweaking to fit around the welds, but I think I've got the first pan ready to fit. It is going to be a very tight fit, and I'm pretty sure once it goes in, it's never coming back out again, so I got to make sure I'm getting this right the first time. Let's take a closer look at how tight the corners are going to be. So I've knocked the corners back where the welds are, and I've also beveled them back on a bit of an angle, and I've got about as tight as I can get all the way across there. And you can see it's cut back at the corner to clear the weld and the fillet weld in the corner. I've done the same thing down at the other end, and I think it might be time to go for it. Well, this is either going to go exactly as planned or not at all as planned. I've got a small spacer block under the far end holding it up so the pan couldn't drop in while I was test fitting it. I'm going to pull that out, and I'm going to start pushing down at the ends and work towards the center. The reason for that is these 2x2s during welding, especially the outer one, because it's got a fillet weld on the inside, the weld has pulled this way, so that piece is bowed in and this piece is bowed out, just because of the sequence of the welding. It's not by much, but that's basically what's holding the center up right now. So my hope is to push the ends in and then work my way towards the center and have those bow out. It's only fractions of an inch, a couple millimeters, but fingers crossed, this goes in and never needs to come out again. Let's give it a try. Just want to go a little bit at a time so nothing goes crooked, because like that. Because when things go crooked, it gets a little tougher to start over. There we go. Okay. All right, my end is in. This side is fighting me a little bit. Hope the hammer's not too loud over the microphone. There we go, starting to go in. Just trying to keep it even as it goes. It looks like the middle's dropped in there. Dropped in, actually. It might actually be working. Wow. That's going to need to be pulled down with a clamp because it's sucked up from the weld, but overall, that's one pan in. That went a lot easier than I thought it was going to. Well, I think I've got the second pan test fit, ground down, ready to go. Let's see what happens this time around. Pull the block out of the far end. That feels like it's stuck already. There we go. Okay. This end is pressed in just a little, and of course this end's gone sideways like it did the first time. All right. A little bit of persuasion. There we go. This end's going in.
2 for 2. Again, this middle piece is going to need to be pushed down with a clamp because it's curved up in the middle here from the heat of this weld, so that's all right. It looks like I'm going to have to do some clamping here as well. And when I put that center pan in, that should push these tight out against the outer pans. So it isn't quite as good a fit, but it's in there. The ends are nice and snug, should be pretty good to weld that. Let's see what happens with pan number 3. What? Well, that's not right. I mean, it fits nicely, but that's a bit of a problem. How did I do that?
This pan appears to be about 2 inches too short, and I haven't cut it yet. So here at the far end, you can see a nice fit of 3 pans. And as we come around this way, I can still see the floor.
Time to break out the aluminum stretcher. This is essentially the same as what I did to join the other sections, and it's nice with aluminum, you can always weld more to it. Luckily, the offcuts from the outer pans will give me the material that I need to do this fix. Well, after a couple of hours playing with the Eastwood 200 aluminum stretcher, I think this floor pan is ready for another test fit.
Gotta be careful turning this around, it's 2 inches longer now.
There, and that's why. Fingers crossed, 3 for 3. Oh, look at that. No hammers required. That slid in perfectly.
Well, now that all 3 pans actually fit, it's time to start welding them in. So I'm going to put some tack welds across the edges, and then I'll flip it over to make sure everything's lined up on the back side. Weld across the ends, and that should pretty much finish the pans being put in.
Okay, so because I'm working up off the floor, I can skip the tacks and just go straight to the stitches. I'm verifying that things are in alignment on the bottom, and in reality, if the top lines up, then the bottom does, since I made the pans the same depth as the box tube. Going from working on the hoist to working on jack stands is rough. This thing is so low to the ground that it's hard to use the foot pedal, and it's hard to get my head low enough to see the weld going on underneath the torch. Once the ends are all stitched in place, I'll start working along the pans, but this is backbreaking work.
Well, I got 3 out of the 4 corners of the pans welded in place, but unfortunately on the last corner I somehow managed to rip a big hole in the back of my pants, so I'm calling it a day. I'll pick this up tomorrow, and we'll see you then. Fade to black. Good morning, everyone. It's a new day, it's a new pair of pants, and it's a day to get this welding finished.
With the corners of the pans already in place, I just need to work along the length of the pans, pull them flush, and then tight with the box tube. It's a simple process, but again, hard on the back. Hey, so I could lift these jack stands a little higher. That might help a little. Using these clamps is working quite well to line everything up. I am placing stitches about 24 inches apart. I'll come back later and add more, but this will get things in the right place. While I'm definitely still no pro, I think some of my welds are coming out all right now. I'm getting more comfortable. The issue right now I'm having is just being consistent.
Well, I've got about 20 stitches on the outer two pans and they're securely held in place, nice and level and straight. Now it's time to put the center pan in. This one's going to be a little more difficult because A, I'm doing it off the floor, but B, I don't have the same ability of clamping, so I'm going to have to use sort of weights to push things into place and lifting from underneath. That said, this pan is more straight. It doesn't have as much of a heat curve in it, so it should be all right. Because I'm doing this off the floor, I've added some little sort of shelves at each end so that when I put this pan in place, it doesn't just drop through and land on the floor. I can also use these at the end just for clamping the first section in place to weld the ends.
That's a pretty good fit.
Once again, I'm cleaning the aluminum where I'll be welding the stitches, this time with a whirlybird instead of a sanding disc or a toothbrush. Welding the ends first allows me to remove the clamps I was using to hold the ends up so I can use them as I work along the middle. This really isn't a comfortable height to work even with the stands raised up more. Using a jack to support the pan from underneath and a mallet to whack it from above with the clamp in place seems to work well for final alignment. You can't quite see that whole thing. Let's fix that. There we go. That's a bit wider. In case you've ever wondered why small welding jobs cost so much and take so long, it's not the welding that takes time. It's the prep work, the setup, and the constant moving around of tools and jig work. With enough welds on the top to hold things together, it's time to flip this over. I have a feeling it's going to be pretty heavy. I do not want to drop this.
Well, flipping that over wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It's definitely heavy, but it's manageable. Now that I've got it flipped over, I have to weld the ends of each of the pans, and I have a feeling I'm going to run out of welding gas and I'm going to run out of welding rod. So I don't think I'll be getting to the exoskeleton in this video, but don't worry, it's still coming.
Using a block as a spacer, I'm clamping the pan to push it up so that it's level with the box tube. I had switched back to the thumb switch because I was just planning on putting a few tacks here, but something's wrong with the thumb switch and it's not giving me enough power, so switching back to the foot pedal and putting some stitches instead.
Unfortunately, that's all I've got for you in this video. I did not get to welding the exoskeleton, but that's a video for next time. I hope you enjoyed this video. Throw a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Give us a like if you enjoyed this video. Consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.